Good day, everybody. I would like to say sometimes good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on what part of the globe you're on. Is Atlanta Discuss? Yes, it's another Friday. We try and bring people that know, people that say the truth. It's always no holds barred. We try and, look at what affects mankind, the developing world, the developed world. Everything is our focal point. Wherever you may be, welcome once again. Today we are checking out the most populous country in the Black world. Yes, that's Nigeria, the largest concentration of Black peoples. Been in a democracy for about 26 years or thereabout, what we'll call the Fourth Republic. And things look a bit shaky. Sometimes the courts don't know what they're doing. Sometimes it looks like the assembly or the legislative aspect of government don't know what they're doing. The ship sometimes seems like it's rudderless, but we really have to find out what is really happening. Is Nigeria still a democratic country or not? Is it a failure of institution? Or maybe Africa needs its own type of democracy. We never know. Former President Obasanjo said recently that maybe Africa needs to look for something that works for it. We don't know. But, well, who else can we discuss the state of Nigeria's democracy with but with Professor Chidi Odinkalu? Prof, welcome to Atlanta Discuss once again.
Good day, Ade. I hope you're good.
I'm trying my best. I'm trying my best. How about you, sir?
We survived, I think.
Amen. That's the so, Prof. Yeah, I mean it's a very tough topic because there's a lot of things going on and all that. But we're just going to look at democratic institutions and processes. We look at human rights and rule of law, electoral integrity and accountability, comparative analysis, lesson learned, and probably future prospect and recommendations if we have the plan. I'm sure while we discuss the lot of references we can go into because there's a lot happening with the institutions in Nigeria. So, Prof, what are your thoughts on the current state of the Nigerian democratic institutions, such as the judiciary and the electoral bodies? It does look like, for example, the people's wishes are not always the result. What is happening, sir?
Well, I want to probably start by characterizing the institutions as the institutions of government. Because if we call them democratic institutions, we'll tend to take democracy for granted. Democracy is a piece of work, of course. It's never perfect. But the question is, at what point do you call it democracy? And then start working towards perfection of it, even if that destination is never attained. And we do understand, of course, that in the system of government, in most systems of government, you have executive, legislative, and judicial roles. Sometimes those roles are fused, or some of those roles may be fused in more than one organ. So we understand that under military rule, for the most part, the legislative and the executive functions were fused in one body. The judicial roles were also shared in many ways between the executive and the legislature, and between the judges and the military. And so you had military tribunals, and judges were playing all manner of roles in them. And now we are in a period of fairly extended civil rule. Again, I want to be careful in the words I use. We are in a period of extended civil rule, and that's a good thing to begin with. Whether or not it is necessarily to be called democratic is a matter of assessment. And democracy assumes several things, of course, one of which is the existence of choice. But essentially, democracy is about counting and accounting. Counting and accounting. In a democracy, you count and account for three things. Number one, you count the people, census. Number two, you count the votes of adults voting and elections. And number three, you count your money, public accounts. And basically, the idea is that through legitimacy acquired through counting the votes and accounting for them, you manage the money of the people Those are the three things: the people, their money, and their votes. All of that comes down to what? Counting and accounting. Democracy essentially is about legitimate arithmetic and the arbitration of disputes over arithmetic. The problem, if you really look at those three dimensions of democratic government, and I would add the fourth, which is legitimate dispute resolution over those three, right? Can you say that we count and account properly for our people? Can you say that we count and account properly for their votes? Can you say that we count and account properly for their money? And can you say that these processes of dispute resolution over those three are legitimate and addressed in a way that is agreeable and minimally satisfactory? Those are the parameters I'd like us to focus on.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So let's assess the independence and the impartiality of these institutions, okay? And what reforms you think they might need. Let's start maybe from the judiciary.
I'm not going to disappoint you. With the judiciary, there is not a lot that can be said in favor of it at the moment. It is quite bad. It is dreadful. And you don't have to go too far. Now, last week,
Yes.
the Court of Appeal in Abuja announced a decision by which a panel of 3 justices of the Court of Appeal, the most senior of whom was sworn in October 2023. The presiding justice sworn in October 2023 purported to arrest a judgment of the same Court of Appeal issued by the Kano Division of the Court of Appeal. And it did not do it by way of a stay of execution. It did it by way of a mandatory injunction. So the Court of Appeal, sitting with junior justices in Abuja, issued a mandatory injunction arresting a judgment of the Court of Appeal issued by more senior justices in Kano over the stool of the Emir of Kano. Okay. That's despicable. I'm not going to even mince words about it. It's not done. All right?
Yes, sir.
Now, if you look at the list of justices of appeal in Abuja, there are about 9 or 10 of them. Yes, there are 10 of them. Justice Okonabang, who presided over this case in Abuja, is number 6. So ahead of him, you have Justice Barka, Justice Oyewole, Justice Banjoko, Justice Mohammed, and Justice Obiora. None of them were found suitable to work on this case. It was a justice of appeal sworn in October 2023, who sat with 2 other justices of the Court of Appeal sworn in after him, right? To arrest the judgment of a justice of the Court of Appeal who has been in the Court of Appeal for over 10 years.
Wow.
Now, why is this so? Because the chairman of APC, as far as I'm concerned, currently is the person who is interested, who appointed the man who is in dispute with the person whom his successors want to install or reinstall as the Emir of Kano. And so the courts are being instrumentalized in a way that is quite honestly despicable. In Rivers State, the previous week, or at the end of last month, 28th of February, the Supreme Court issued a judgment in respect of a case that is still in the High Court, in the Federal High Court. And now you have a situation in which lawyers in the case in the Federal High Court have applied to the Federal High Court to say, well, The Supreme Court has already decided the case we filed, so we don't need you to decide it anymore. But the Supreme Court does not have original jurisdiction over such matters. It can only exercise jurisdiction by way of an appeal, which it did not have before it on that case. The Supreme Court framed in black and white the two issues for determination in that case, none of which included the matter of resolving the question of whether or not the defection of the Rivers State legislators had occurred. And yet, that is what the Supreme Court purported to decide. So when you look at the kinds of decisions that come out of our courts these days, I'm not even going to go to the Court of Appeal, what the Court of Appeal did in, say, Plateau State in 2023, when it basically robbed the PDP of all the seats that it won and sent them to the APC. I could go on and on, but it is manifestly the case that our judiciary is in a dreadful, dreadful situation. But it is even worse because that is the place now where elections are decided. Elections are no longer decided by voters. And you see, the judiciary is not configured to do the arithmetic of counting and accounting that I started off with. What it does is resolve disputes over processes for managing that. Okay? But these days, what you do is after INEC has finished its work, elections then relocate to the courts where ultimately the votes of judges decide them. And that is really the ultimate coup, because what it means is that the judges have toppled the people under color of rule of law. And that's where we are now.
Wow. That's scary. Very scary. What about the legislative arm of government? Do you think they're faring better?
The National Assembly and Parliament generally, whether at the state or federal levels, but particularly the federal level, because that is the one that most people see, has never really been too well regarded since 2006. I think it's fair to say that the high point of the judiciary in Nigeria was 2006 when the Senate voted down President Obasanjo's third-term attempt. And since then, it's traveled only one way, which was down. Under the eighth Parliament of the eighth National Assembly, which was 2015 to 2019, Bukola Saraki, who didn't much agree with President Buhari, kind of tried to steer it back to a modicum of accommodation with the executive, principled accommodation with the executive. But Ahmed Lawan drove it down the shaft, and in my view at least. And my good friend Godswill Akpabio has totally destroyed the whole damn thing. It's difficult to see where the salvation is for the National Assembly under the current leadership of the President of the Senate. It seems to me, the national anthem was changed in less than 2 hours. Appropriation acts get approved with the speed of light. Everything, ministers were cleared, many of whom had not done the National Youth Service. Questions were not asked. They took their bows, went and got assigned offices. So however you look at it, it's difficult to see that as bad as the judiciary is, the National Assembly is probably much worse. The only thing is, unlike the National Assembly, the judiciary actually decides who rules. The judiciary decides who gets to the National Assembly. The National Assembly, in that sense, can do a lot of damage, but in my view, the judiciary actually does a heck of a lot more damage.
Oh, wow. Well, it would be fair to overlook the executive in this analysis. Do you score them poorer or higher than the others, or we're still in the same melee?
Well, at what level because I don't want to generalize about the executive. We have we have 37 executives in Nigeria. I don't want to say 38, or even though I could. So you have the federal executive, which is one. You have 36 state executives.
Okay, let's deal with the federal.
And then you've got the FCT, although the FCT is a ministry under the federal. You know, the fact of the matter is most Nigerians will tell you things are very difficult, things are very dreadful. You know, but you see, if citizens have the impression that their leaders share in their burdens and their pains, I think they can manage. Okay? But when citizens are dying in penury and impoverishment, and their leaders are living large, you know, it becomes problematic to really convince citizens that good things are happening or about to happen. Where the government tells us that we're distressed as a country, we're quite, you know, to put not too fine a point on it, we basically are in a situation of sovereign insolvency, right? And they have to make ends meet. They're borrowing all over the place. And yet, we have done something we've never done before. Buy four-wheel drives for every legislator in the country at a time when the price of petrol has has about quadrupled, and our currency has lost nearly 100% in value, and therefore cost of living is massively high. We have bought four-wheel drives when we should actually be saving on petrol because it is just bloody expensive now, right? And we bought four-wheel drives at each of the four-wheel drives came in at about over 3 times the market value of those vehicles. Because if you go to price those Prados, you know what the market will tell you, 15, 18, you know, in terms of the cost. They came in at about 3 to 4 times the market price of those vehicles. So I cannot tell you that if I were to tell you that the executive is more hopeful, I'd be lying, and Nigerians would probably lynch me. Because the reality of everyone's life is that things are dreadfully difficult, and the executive is behaving as if they're in another country.
I mean, discussing the democratic...
And this is executive at the federal level. I'm not at all, as I said, I'm not in a position to generalize about the state levels, because different governors in some governors in some cases appear to be trying.
Wow. That's very sad. Let's look at human rights and rule of law. A lot has been happening recently. I'm sure you read about the youth corps that voiced out, you know, opinion on the situation of things in the country. So how do you evaluate the human rights record, particularly with regards to freedom of speech, assembly, and association? I mean, it's bad enough that the 3 tiers of government might be wobbly, but do the people have freedom of speech in any way? Is there anything we can rejoice on in that area?
You cannot be talking about 3 arms of government being in the state they are and then look at freedom of speech
Absolutely.
as enjoying a boom, because the people who are not performing don't have any interest in seeing citizens who complain vigorously. Or who can complain vigorously. And you see that in what's been done with the abuse, for instance, of the Cybercrimes Act, the chronic abuse of the Cybercrimes Act in intimidating citizens, hurling them off the streets, throwing them behind bars. And it's not just, that's not just being done by public entities. You saw what happened to Dele Farotimi, which in a way advertises the Nigerian situation that one man could instrumentalize the police and tell them, go and collect that young man for me from that place, wherever he lives, and bring him to my village where I am the most important person. And I will decide what happens to him. And he is brought from Lagos, it's taken to Ekiti, where he's channeled to a magistrate of the choice of the person who has acquired him. And the magistrate is obviously instructed as to what to do. And all of that is happening under the baleful watch of the system. So you cannot really say that you know, and if this is happening to Dele Farotimi, who is a very senior, this is not a junior lawyer by any stretch of imagination, you can then think about what is happening to other people. I mean, the only good thing is we've got social media now, which the government cannot control. And so, howsoever they choose to do it, they're going to hear it. And nobody can say that anyone put this young youth corper, Ushie, isn't that her name, up to it, right?
Yes.
She was being spontaneous. And, you know, she put out her thing and, you know, they started dumping on her, started trying to intimidate her. Now, there are lots of other young people all over the place who are in similar and much worse situations. Um, and who are sharing their experiences by WhatsApp, by other means, and you never know what's going to trigger critical mass in these matters. In the nature of the 21st century, you never know what is going to trigger critical mass. I mean, nobody could have believed that it took, you know, you know, the outlier that happened in Tunisia to trigger the Arab Spring. You know, a hawker basically on the streets of the country. So you can never be too sure in this situation what people are going to connect with and begin to see themselves in. I mean, you've seen the case of this other young, I don't know whether you have, the young woman who says she's the daughter of a police officer um, who served for 25 years or more in the police force. And at the moment, her father is lying critically ill. The police have only donated 10,000 naira to his well-being. They have sold, the family has had to sell the only piece of land which he acquired while he was doing the work of the police. And she was speaking to serving police officers and telling them, look, the next time they tell you to come and shoot us when we are protesting, know that you will be my father when you leave the force, right? Now, people are sharing their experiences, and all government is doing is producing fake statistics to tell them what you're experiencing is not reality. The high prices in the market are not happening to you. You know, and you have the son of the president telling the world that his father, you know, in a state of enhanced capability, chemically, I suspect, telling the world that his father is the greatest thing that ever happened to Nigeria since sliced bread. So all of that is what we've got at the moment passing for a country. And if you challenge that, then you suffer the fate of the young youth corper, or you suffer the fate of Dele Farotimi, or the people who are being abducted all across the world, all across the country, and being charged with cybercrime violations.
Wow. I was going to go into election integrity and accountability, but there's no point because we all know the situation of our electoral process. But let me
The
go to
INEC chairman has destroyed, this current INEC chairman has destroyed INEC as an institution that anyone can look at for anything. I don't think it's going to much change. What he has not accomplished, the judiciary has helped to finish off. And therefore, anyone talking about electoral change, electoral reform, is quite honestly being duplicitous. There isn't actually much wrong with the Electoral Act 2022. By the way, at the time that it was adopted, a lot of people, a lot of us made a lot of noise and doorstepped a lot of people to get it enacted. And the idea was it was actually a huge advance on what we had. And quite honestly, it was. Now, it was supposed to make our elections rigging proof. What happened? The judiciary destroyed it, casualized it, and then Mahmoud Yakubu started announcing results that were entirely invented, so that the display system, right, that was supposed to give you transparent elections was destroyed by the judiciary and by Mahmoud Yakubu, who invented numbers. And so it gets back to the first place we started, which is what? Counting and accounting of the people, their votes and their money. Mahmoud Yakubu is not interested in counting the votes of the people. He invents the numbers. The judiciary certifies the inventions. We've not had a census since 2006. And as you can see, the the president, I think they've presented the president with a budget recently, and he said it was too much. So we're not about to have a census anytime soon. We're not counting our people. About our money, well, you tell me when last you heard that we actually counted our money in Nigeria. Since Gowon told us in 1974 that our problem is not money, but how to spend it. So this is where we are, and I don't, I don't want to sound pessimistic or hopeless or despondent, but I also don't want to sound overly optimistic for the sake of being optimistic. I just want to be sure that we all understand where we are, and then we can decide where do we go from here.
Interesting. So how can Nigerians hold their elected officials accountable, and what mechanisms are in place to prevent corruption and ensure transparency? I mean, it's a tough call, I know, but
I don't know how Nigerians can hold their leaders accountable. At the end of the day, every adult citizen has got to decide that for themselves.
Absolutely.
I know how Nigerians cannot hold their leaders accountable. And we cannot do that in the way that we are going at the moment, which is basically trying to outsource our civic responsibilities to other people. So most Nigerians believe that there are some people who are so bulletproof that they can take on all the problems of the country, and speak to the politicians and to the security agencies, and these people are not going to die. And so we will look for, Shawore and Sahara will do it, or Samuel Ogundikbe and Gazette Nigeria will do it, or People's Gazette. We will look to Femi Falana, Olisa
Professor
Bakoba.
Odinkalu.
We look to all those people. Those are the people, you people who have got a platform, who have got a voice. And we do not see ourselves. We think holding government accountable is something that other people do. Okay? And those people come with capes or with kryptonite. And, they are defenders of the universe. So we've not normalized the enterprise of holding our leaders to account. Instead, what do? Every person who comes into a position of relative power or influence is the best thing since sliced bread. Whether the person is a local government chairman or chairwoman, a supervisory councillor, a commissioner, a vice chancellor. I mean, look at what's happening with our universities, for crying out loud, right? Now, you've had, I think, 3 or so recent hires of vice chancellors in our universities. Unizik in Anambra State, in Oka, Uni Abuja at the federal capital, and University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Every one of those has been cancelled. Why? Because the people who were in office in the universities could not even create a modicum of appearance of respectability in the process of trying to hire a vice chancellor. They just didn't want any rules to be applied. Why? Because people see a university not as a place where you go to develop ideas and develop our future leaders and scientists and all of that. They rather see the running a university as an opportunity to award contracts, steal money, and make money. At the moment, I am pro-chancellor of the State University in Anambra State, right? The Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu University. And you look at the way we run universities, and that's why lecturers are fleeing the universities, because there is no effort to make the place minimally adapted to the efforts of researchers, of teachers, of students. All of them are to be exploited across the board in our universities. And so that is why the offices of administrative and ministerial offices in the universities, from vice chancellor to head of department, and sub-deans and deans, become offices over which people are prepared to kill. Because if you're a proper academic, actually, you don't want to do administration. You don't want to be... University president does not require a professor.
That's true.
Correct?
Yes.
Dean does not have to be an expert in the field, because these are administrators. If you are an academic worth your onions, you really don't want to be derailed into that. But in Nigeria, because of the perverse incentives we've created, we have seen that that is the place where people want to go to. They no longer want to be academics. So this is the thing. Around every major office, we create such perverse incentives as citizens that accountability flies out through the window.
Wow. Well, it's just scary for me. So, how does our democracy, for example, compare with other countries in Africa? Is there a reference point, for example, that we can emulate? Because it does look like in our case, nothing seems to be working. Is there a sister country nearby you think we should look at, which should be encouraging, that might even have similar problems as we do, and they're doing very well?
Well, I don't know what very well means. Very well is relative. But look at
Okay.
Ghana, okay?
Okay.
Ghana has almost always had very close elections. The biggest blowout Ghana had was in this past election.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
But even at that, the margin of victory was what? 56% was President Mahamas or thereabouts, or was President
Yeah,
Mahamas.
56, 57 there. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, and that was an election organized by an incumbent party.
Mm.
And before the Electoral Commission started announcing the results, the sitting vice president went out and conceded.
Mm.
Okay? Now, who was the candidate of the ruling party? You've got to credit that.
Mm.
Okay? And so the best efforts of the NPP the ruling NPP in Ghana to try to rig the elections came to naught because Ghanaians and their institutions held firm. Now, and this was at a time when the outgoing president, President Akufo-Addo, had basically Akufo-Addo'd most institutions in Ghana.
Mm.
But Ghanaians held firm. Now, you go to Botswana. The Botswana Democratic Party had ruled the country since independence in 1966, right?
Yes.
And yet, it lost all but 4 seats in the parliamentary elections. It was entirely blown out of the water. Correct?
Correct.
And President Masisi respected the outcome and quit power. So, you've got to say, look at Senegal, for instance. Despite the best efforts of President Macky Sall to frustrate the opposition and ensure his own, longevity in power, the institutions of Senegal managed to herd him out and ensure transition to a different government. So my point is, actually, there are countries around Africa from which we can learn that the process of look at what's happening in Kenya, for instance. Kenya's young people are making life intolerable
they are. Yeah, they are.
for President Ruto.
Mm.
And there isn't much he can do about it. Because the nature of the Kenyan constitution means that he cannot clobber everybody. And, the judiciary is holding him to account. The young people are holding him to account. He's been disappearing a lot of young people. But now, so you end up in the situation in which even his own cabinet members are saying, my sons or my children were also disappeared.
Oh, wow.
Okay? So the country is coming to terms with the fact that the exercise of power has got to be held to account. In Nigeria, we are all afraid. The INEC chairman invents numbers. Judges are happy to certify the numbers, behave as if the inventions are not real. I mean, look at Rivers State.
Mm.
Nobody can dispute that the 27 legislators actually announced their defection. They were received by APC. They filed an affidavit in court. Those are the records. Now, with the complicity of the judiciary, they have rethreaded the affidavits, removed them, altered the documents. Supreme Court says that is okay.
So let's go back to President Obasanjo. I'm sure you heard when he said that we need to evolve a type of democracy that works for Africa. I don't know what he means by that, but in the case of Nigeria and Obasanjo being a Nigerian also, is there any other parameters we can look at? Is it that we're not democratic in nature? Because the people, from everything you've said today, from what I've seen and read, it does seem like we, the people, are enabling all these things and we seem to be okay with it. Is it fair to say Nigerians, maybe, I mean, it's not fair to generalize, but majority of us are inherently dishonest and we're just bidding our time for our own time to steal, our time to enjoy, because nobody seems to be doing anything except a negligible percentage, like you said.
Unfortunately, Obasanjo has to take a significant part of responsibility for where we are.
Absolutely.
Okay. You know, it's easy for him, and the man is ridiculously talented, and his capacity for work is incredible.
Absolutely.
But he created precedents as president that and have enabled all of these things that we are seeing at the moment. You know, I mean, in 2003, he rigged the elections, that his own re-election, and then he went thereafter, he kneecapped the PDP as a party. He absolutely kneecapped the internal governance mechanisms of the party, which is really how we have cascaded down to where we are, where the parties are castrated. All the parties are castrated, and basically parties are now in the private pockets of particular individuals. Secondly, Obasanjo was the person who started trying to, by 2007, he got Morris Iwu to invent results. The result he announced for the presidential election was written up. It had nothing to do with the votes or ballots. In Anambra State, Morris Iwu announced a result. Morris Iwu suspended Peter Obi from the ballot. He removed anybody who could contest the seat. And then the result he announced was over 100% of registered voters in favor of Andiba. Okay? And all of that was kosher. And all of that was under Obasanjo. He created the precedents. And these days, when he says anything, these people simply go and resurrect all the rubbish he did. And so I don't think I'm not sure that this is anything about democracy. And I like to say this. Traditional African kingdoms were by and large configured with checks and balances. And I'm sure I've told you this before. Oyo Kingdom, the Oyo Empire, was a classic, right? You had the Alaafin, but you also had other bodies, right? In Yoruba land, generally, you have the Ogboni, for instance. You had the Oyomesi, right? In the Oyo Empire. And the Alaafin could not run away with power because he could be deposed. He could be impeached, right? And if the Alaafin was impeached, the fate that befell him was very clear. And the Oyo was the biggest empire in the tropical Nigeria, the territory called Nigeria now. You know, the other, of course, was the Benin. Okay. Now, in a lot of these places also, accountability was maintained through through divination, through priests and priestesses who were independent. Yes? And even in Yoruba, you know, so whether it's in Yoruba land or in Igbo land, you know, or in the Niger Delta, where priests and priestesses had a lot of powers and were independent. Okay? Now, if you went to, for instance, the Yakar, right, in Ugep, in Cross River State. So I'm not going to, so that we don't keep focusing on Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa and Fulani. Now, if you go to among the Yakar were a population who had an issue. What was it? Population, replacement of themselves. Okay? So they had fertility issues. And so they established a theocracy. The entire Yakar system, they had a king. But the real power rested with the priests and priestesses. Why? Because they needed children. And because they needed children, power was with independent diviners. And the independent diviners held the political office of the kingdom to account. And these days, general overseers, bishops, priests, pastors, reverends have become part of the problem, part of the corruption of political power. And when bishops want to go and visit governor, they are expecting bags of cash. When they visit presidents or cardinals or general overseers, they're expecting bags of cash. General overseers are appointing PAs and seconding them to the presidency so that the president, they know who is visiting the president, and GO can levy their own tithe and tax on those people. This, I'm not telling you fiction. This is happening. All right. So when all of this is happening, how can you even say that this has nothing to do with African society? Because we have not tried to live the values or the standards of traditional African society at all. Our traditional African society did have interlocking mechanisms of accountability and respected independence. Okay? Which is why, for instance, the Yorubas talk about what? The Omoloabi, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you. And the Igbos will tell you, Ezia Fakego, a good name is better than money. But those are no longer values that we treasure. And then people will come and tell you our traditional systems, democracy is bad. No, we had values that were entirely consistent with accountable government. The problem is they've been destroyed.
Wow. Wow. Scary. Nothing seems to be working. So let's talk about opposition politics in Nigeria. I mean, it does look like they are not in existence.
Because they're not.
Yeah, I was watching the Napata Akpoti case very closely. I saw Senator Eretiki Gibe come out and speak against what she was doing. I felt that, I mean, being a woman, being in the Labour Party, I noticed a lot of Labour Party senators were even doing the job of APC for them.
Opposition, including the fake chairman of the committee.
Yes, who has legal problems in America with his license. And what beats my imagination, and now all of a sudden we seem to have some form of opposition coalescing in SDP and all that. I mean, from your view, what do you think the future holds? I mean, the opposition, do you think they are really recalibrating, or is just another effort in futility?
No, the entire landscape is in a very bad place. Look, there is no way to try and there's no way to minimize it. It is in a bad place. It's in a bad place, full stop.
Wow.
And as bad as the APC is, I think the only thing worse is the opposition. And I hear people say, yeah, opposition has been killed by APC, but I don't think it's good enough, quite honestly with you. You know, opposing the APC is the easiest thing in the world. You don't need help to do it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, but you know what is happening? P2B is going around donating money here and there. You know, occasionally he will issue one statement or two, but he does not have a party. Atiku's spokesperson will issue a statement here or there, you know, mourn this person, you know, bemoan the other catastrophe. He does not have a party. And they've not tried to create one. And Nasir El-Rufai has jumped off, but with all due respect, El-Rufai's reputation does not deserve anybody's attention. You know, he is widely regarded as a mass murderer. And I don't think anybody can seriously put forward El-Rufai with the record he had. He amassed over 8 years as governor, a record of intolerance and persecution of everybody and liquidation of lots of people, if I may say so. Because most people will remember the Zaria massacre, the extermination of Shiites in Zaria, which is where he comes from, right? Yes. And after the extermination of the Shiites, December 15, 16, 2015, okay, the army engineers in one div in Kaduna put forward 47 trucks. With the 47 trucks, they scooped up the remains of the people who have, because these people were sleeping at night when they drove through them and liquidated them. They scooped up the remains of all of these people, right? Went on the outskirts in Mando and poured those remains into mass graves. It took over 6 hours for companies of soldiers with 47 trucks of the liquid remains of dead people to do the mass burial. That's what El-Rufai oversaw. Now, if you then want to make that person, I'm not even going to go into Southern Kaduna. If you then take that person and try to build a coalition, an opposition coalition around him, and want to persuade ordinary citizens to join in their own liquidation, you're wasting your time. So at the moment, and that is the person now whom people are saying, oh, let's listen to him, let's join him. He's the person speaking against Tinubu. But you can't persuade anybody, you can't persuade me, you can't persuade most people that the only voice that we can have against Tinubu is El-Rufai. You give me El-Rufai and Tinubu 1,000 times, I know the devil I will choose, and it is not El-Rufai.
So now, having said all that, wherein lies the future of the country, our democracy? The legislature, the judiciary, nothing seems to be working.
That's not where the future is. What is democracy about? It's about the people.
About the people, exactly.
Ultimately, this thing is got to be done by the people. It's not going to be done by the institutions.
Are we close to the people doing what they have to do?
And you know, I said in the course of this conversation, you don't know where critical mass is going to come from.
You gave the Tunisian example, unexpected quotas.
Yes.
And it spread across the Middle East.
Precisely. Look at this young youth corper. Had you heard of her before?
No.
Had you heard of her ancestors before?
No, never.
And see what she's galvanized. Okay? Now, Natasha Akpoti has become an unlikely heroine of democratic renewal. I've known Natasha for over 15 years. And, you know, did I see this future in her? No.
Wow.
But here we are. You know, I've worked with Natasha on several other things, you know, in the past. Brilliant, articulate, hardworking. You will always give that to her. But did I see her as the person to rally Nigerians in the way she's rallying and the world? No. But there she is, and she's doing it with skill and determination and courage. And I applaud her for that. And I support her in the way she's going. So, and what is happening? The women have become the leaders. Now, in the midst of all of that, of course, we've got people like Ireti Kingibe, who has buried her political future as far as I'm concerned, because, you know, the way she laid the boot in on Natasha in this situation was despicable. And I'm not going to, again, I know her, but this is not personal. I'm describing what she did. It is absolutely, utterly despicable what she did, as is what Senator Lujimi did, as is what Senator Tinubu did, as is even worse what Senator Itagewa and Senator Uche Ekunife. Of course, Itagewa, Uche Ekunife, Tinubu are no longer in the Senate, but they weighed in as women who have been in the Senate. And they're dreadful. What they did was dreadful. Right? The only woman in the Senate who has come out of this with some dignity, other than Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, is Senator Ipalibo, who, and it's not because she said anything, it is because she has maintained a dignified silence. And that is what I expected. If you do not want to be helpful, keep quiet. What about that? But no, they felt this was the opportunity to go and destroy this young political actor. And for that, I keep saying, I hope Nigerians teach them a bloody, bloody political lesson, ruin their political careers, and that is it. Because you are not, and this is why I do believe, you know, that's why, despite everything I have told you here, I am cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic because young people of today will no longer tolerate the nonsense my generation was willing or is willing to tolerate.
Absolutely.
They are a lot more impatient and they are a lot more insolent. All right? That therefore means that they are going to be asking awkward questions, and when the answers do not exist, they will take steps to realize answers for themselves. That gives me hope, perversely.
I mean, clearly we're in a bad situation in Nigeria. I mean, if you look at the 1983 when Buhari came in, I don't even think the NPN people did 25% of what is happening today.
NPN in 1983 got 47% of the votes, and we called it a landslide.
A landslide. This
Yes.
gentleman got 38 or something there.
Thank you. We called it, it was actually called moonslide after
Landslide, yeah.
landslide, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, we are, Obasanjo manufactured 61% for Yaradua. People forget that. He
Mhm.
manufactured 61% for Yaradua in 2007. As a matter of electoral arithmetic, nobody can score 61% of the votes in Nigeria.
Yeah,
Absolutely nobody.
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, with
But
the way
Obasanjo did it. He wrote up the results. And today he comes to preach about these things. It's difficult to take him seriously.
It is. It
Is
is.
it possible to organize credible elections in Nigeria? Of course it is.
It is.
And if you organize credible elections in Nigeria, they will be very competitive. And around that, you can build a country and foster institutions, but we don't want to do that.
There's a picture I saw during the week, the one I was talking about, where the Scandinavian countries were highly rated, even above America in democracy. And I saw that India is at 7.3 over 10, just almost with America with 7.9. So based on what you said, India, the most populous democracy, still organizes free and fair election, despite there some semblance of volatility. And most importantly, they've never had a military coup. So, Prof, my final question to you is this. I haven't said all this, Indian Sui Millia and all that. I was referring to the 83 MPM politician who took things for granted and the military came in. Now, in present-day Nigeria, there's pressure from Rivers State. Kano is hot. Lagos itself, the home of the president, doesn't seem to be stable. There seems to be instability. Do you think the politicians are provoking the jackboots again? Do you think I mean, I'm not praying for it. Nobody's asking for it, but don't you think it's a direct provocation on the military to come and rescue the country? I mean, I'm not saying it will happen or not, but it was less than this in 1983, and lo and behold, then we had Buhari, Babangida, Abacha, Abdul Salam, and you know, Prof.
I mean, we can have that conversation some other time because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
requires delicate unbundling.
Monthly, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it requires very delicate unbundling.
Mhm.
I do think that the landscape right now is a little more difficult
Mm. For
for
them
that
to,
kind of thing.
absolutely, yeah.
For all manner of reasons. So it's got little to do with what the politicians are doing and a lot more to do with just the landscape. Um, and a lot of that coup proofing of Nigeria was done by Obasanjo.
Mhm.
Um, when in 1983, for instance, you had the one div in Kaduna, you had two div in Ibadan, you had three div in Jos, and you
Yes.
had 82 div in Enugu,
Don't go, yeah.
and then you had the cantonments in Lagos, right?
Yeah.
Now you have um, you have one div in Kaduna, two div in uh, Ibadan, three in Jos, 82 div in
Enugu.
Enugu, 81 in
Yeah.
Lagos.
Yeah.
You have the seventh division in you have seventh division in the South, I believe,
I
right?
think, yeah, Port
You
Harcourt,
have eighth division
Alaba.
in Sokoto, isn't it?
Yes, correct.
Or in Maiduguri. And then
Mhm.
you have the JTF in Maiduguri. You have a joint task force in Jos. You have a joint task force in the Niger Delta. You do have, of course, the presidential guards in Abuja with the cantonments in Abuja. the things you've got to move to be able to, the coordination required makes it almost impossible to contemplate that kind of thing now, because it's just not possible to do that in a way that makes sense, right? Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but I actually think that what the country needs is probably not to be derailed into the conversation about that when we can have a proper conversation about where we are, what is happening to us, why our situation is the way it is, what our rulers are doing with our public assets, with our collective patrimony, and how we can address the failures that come from all of that. Because unless we do that, we're going to end up in the situation in which we are and keep degenerating and making things a heck of a lot much worse for everyone and for the country. And now, one more thing. If that happens to Nigeria, West Africa is in trouble.
Absolutely. That will have been my follow-up because we might just throw everything. I think nobody wants that to happen, but
Precisely.
I just like a situation where the politicians are provoking. I've had people send me questions and all that, and all that. But you said something that really fascinated me, and I think I have to do a follow-up on that. How can we address the way our leaders are dealing with our patrimony, mismanaging our Commonwealth and all that? You said that would be a good discussion to have. And that's your last question. Is there any way, any one style fits all or two style fits all that it's worrisome?
Again, I guess that again would take
for another discussion.
a different conversation because
all right, no
we
problem.
open up all manner of kind of worms here.
All right, Prof. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy. Thank you for always creating time for us. We've been speaking to Professor
Thanks a lot, Ade.
Odinkalu. Prof, thanks for your time. To our viewers, it's a wrap there. See you next week, Friday. Prof, once again, thank you for your time. God bless.
Thanks so much.
All right.